Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And this week we're continuing our career journeys of the CPO. And I'm absolutely delighted to have an old colleague of mine, well not old, but a colleague from the past of mine, Jen Scherler, who is the global head of country consultants at Cisco. So back in the day, we were way starting out in our respective careers, weren't we, Jen? So we remember drinking buckets of wine. I don't know if that's why I start a podcast, but those are some of the memories back in the past in our 20s. And wow, how far you've gone. So thank you for joining me on the podcast. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your current role within Cisco and kind of the journey you've been on within that business before we go back?
Yeah, no problem at all. So I work for Cisco, which is a big global tech company, about 86,000 employees. That's regular employees. Probably about the same again in terms of contingent workers. And so the role I do is in our HR organisation, and we call it People and Communities. And I am heading up the global country consultants. So we go across 95 plus countries across the world. And we have, of course, HR activities that need to be done to employ people in those countries. And so I've got country consultants that are aligned to those 95 countries, and it's all outside of the US, really dealing with the employee journey for when people are in the building to when they leave. So they're not part of recruitment, but they're all about how do we employ people within the country. And so most of the work is around compliance. So are we compliant within that country? It's also enacting change. So if Cisco wants to acquire another company, we're highly acquisitive. So when we acquire a company, actually how we acquire employees in a country is different. If we want to restructure, my team get involved in that, because of course there are differences whether you're doing that in Peru or UK or in a works council country like Germany. So there are differences. So the country consultants I have run globally outside of the US, and we're doing all things needed to employ somebody. And so the team are around 50 people. And so some are aligned to one country, some are aligned to a lot. And I've got a leadership team that help me manage that big group of team. But it's a huge privilege to be part of this. I've been doing the job for about 2 years now. So yeah.
And it is a massive job. You must be learning all the time. The whole thing about you're having to jump in and out of just in different countries, you're not going to know everything. So what skills are you using, to be successful in a role at this level? Because you can't possibly know all the local laws or anything like that. What do you think?
No, and it was one thing, when the vacancy came up, it was one thing going, but I don't know what we need to do in Lebanon or Vietnam, and thinking that I had to know. Whereas actually, as a leader of leaders that lead then the individual contributors, you don't need to know everything. Of course, what you need to be able to do is to identify, okay, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And then finding out how do you get the information to then go, what is the best route forward? And quite often it is around, getting legal knowledge. And we've got people that we access for that. And then also looking at, okay, what does a business want to do? What do we want to do legally? Sometimes there can be a slight difference between those two different things. And where in that continuum do we want to land? So there's a judgment there as well. So for me, it's really about leveraging the people and finding a network of people that do know, and orchestrating that, bringing the people together and helping to create the right environment so that you can understand the problem and make the best call that you can based on what legally we need to do and the culture within Cisco. So I've learned to let go of things, and sometimes there are escalations where I do need to understand the nuts and bolts for that escalation, but I don't need to know everything all of the time. But that's a big transition. If you think about back when we were drinking our buckets of red wine, I was an individual contributor and had to be the person that knew.
You had to be an expert, didn't you? Yeah,
exactly. And so it is a big shift, and one that I've been on a journey for. But and don't get me wrong, there are days where there's like imposter syndrome going, but you don't know. No, actually, you have to remind yourself to go, I'm not here to know, I'm here to lead and help create an environment where we can get to a real understanding what the real problem is and what is the solution, or what is the outcome the business is trying to drive for, and how do we do that in the best way possible.
Yes, I think it's really interesting, again, talking to you literally 20 odd years after we worked together, both as individual contributors, and that whole thing, that the slight distance. So what I'm hearing, I'm noticing is and I think you'd have to do this not to have a nervous breakdown, is to be able to slightly distance yourself from everything that's going on and literally taking a step back. You're being calm and analytical about what the problem is, and then helping coordinate the solving of it, as opposed to handling it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know whether experience, age, who knows what it is, but I think that you're right. That point of being able to stand back and with a calm head. And I just keep reminding myself in terms of, okay, nothing really bad. And Luce, you were just saying about in terms of some of your clients, you're dealing with people in the NHS, or they are dealing with real life and death situations.
Yeah.
I work in tech. Yes, of course, there are things that have a big impact. But in terms of actually, is anybody going to get injured because of the decision we're making here? No. Okay. And it just, I don't know. And we always find a way. There has never been an instance where we haven't found a way. Sometimes it's been harder. Sometimes, we may have got knocked down the first or second time and it's taken third time lucky, but we've got there in the end. And I think it's just being.
So you've not been fearful about making mistakes then either. So you kind of, I mean, that's something both personally, you talk about psychologically safe cultures, but you also, from your point of view, you're going, it's okay. You're being kind to yourself in terms of your self-talk. It's not life and death. We can work it out.
Yeah, and I've yet to come across somebody in my working life when you're gathering together to solve a problem that was actually trying to do harm to somebody else, or to have very ill intentions. Okay, people may have different objectives, but I cannot think of a time where somebody was really ill-intentioned in the work that I've done. Now, I may well be lucky in the cultures I've worked in, or it may be the work that I've done doesn't mean that you have people that ill-intended. So I think if you can come to a situation where you go, okay, everyone's trying to find a way to achieve that opportunity, that growth goal, or are trying to deal with a problem, then it's all to play for. And I think in the work that we do, there quite often isn't a perfect answer. So you're always doing, on balance, I think this is the right way. And hindsight's a great thing. You're like, gosh, if only we'd known. But you can only go on the information you've got, and you go, on balance, what's the right way? Now, there are times where you look back and go, oh gosh, we should have asked that person, or we should have included them. It's learning. Again, I think I've always been the sort of person that's been open as well to go, I haven't got the answer. I've got an answer which on balance I think is the best route forward. Yeah, exactly. So I think if you also show a bit of humility, that you've got to show confidence, particularly when you're leading a team, but you're not saying, it's my way or no way, and this is the only way to do it. And because then when you do fail, that's when you really do have egg on your face. Whereas if you make sure you've got the right stakeholders, the right voices in the room, and take everybody with you, and that you understand the risk that you take, then if you do fall down and scrape your knee, jump back up and let's get going. So I think there is I'm slightly more I'm definitely calmer than probably 20 years ago. And I guess because there is, as you go up in the organisation, there is so much that you're not in direct control of. So it's almost like you can paralyse yourself trying to control everything, and you can't.
Yeah, yeah. Karma, maybe, but I think also the same person when it comes over. So still, I think that's a humility or an authenticity. So considering, you know, the seniority of the role that you're in, and you still feel like the same person to talk to, which I think that's the thing about being accessible, and I guess getting buy-in, because you're managing huge numbers of people as well, aren't you? How many people are you managing at the moment?
So 50 odd, but I think it's also like the ecosystem in which we operate in is a far greater ecosystem of probably a number of hundreds. So even though there's direct leadership, actually your organisation has a broader impact. And I think that's where I think I have learnt on the journey is actually to have, you know, to understand where you can have impact beyond your direct, you know, your specific focus of work. There are lots of other people that are either relying on you or you need, and it's how you create that ecosystem. And yes, I've got direct leadership that I'm very invested in the development and the performance of my direct team, but also the broader team. And so I've got a part to play in that as well. So I think, yeah, it's understanding that it's so much broader.
Yeah. So
Tell
me a little bit about that, because I think that's what you're pinpointing there is one of these things that people often talk about in CIPD. As you get more senior, you've got to be more strategic, you've got to be able to look wider out there and have those relationships outside of your direct area. You're talking about this broader ecosystem. What skills do you think have been key in doing that? If, you know, someone else saying, how do I do that? What do you think is required to build those?
And I think that is a skill that you can do, you know, as an individual contributor, to go, okay, the work I'm doing is, you know, whether you want to write it down or just provide a mental mind map. Okay, who is it that's relying on what I'm doing here, and who am I relying on? Okay, now how do I create the best relationships with those people as possible? So rather than just going, they serve me, I serve them, actually, how do you create as positive relationship? Because then, even though you're not a leader in that individual contributor role, you have an opportunity to lead, or to influence that relationship. And even when people are more senior, you still have an opportunity to have a massive impact in their work. So yeah, I think regardless of where you are, is just to think beyond your specific work and what you're doing, to see who else relies on you and you rely on.
What would you do? What would be an example of something you might do to sort of go above and beyond? Because people, I suppose you could easily just do what you need to do. Is there any...
Yeah, so like even a simple thing is to, you know, as you look at it and think, okay, I think Luce needs this piece of information. You know, Lucinda asked me for this information, so I give it to her. Okay, what about just having a coffee chat to go, look, I know you do this, I know you need this. Can you just explain why you need it? What is important to you with what I provide? How does that, if that isn't of the quality, what are the impacts? What is it that you would like me to know as I'm putting this piece of work? And then go, actually, and then what is it that, Lucinda, you could do to help me in my job as well? So I think just sometimes it's just having a dialogue. Quite often we assume, or particularly when we're more junior, we react to a request and go, I'll just do that. Well, actually, it's an opportunity to understand where that piece of work fits into the bigger picture. And so people use this word strategic, and it feels like this mystical thing up here. For me, it's just thinking broader and more longer term. And those little things of just understanding each element of work that you do, where does it fit into the bigger picture? And not just the work, but the relationships and the connections with other people.
But by actually asking that is in itself going to be, someone would really appreciate you're doing that, and then go, oh, okay, I understand why you're doing that, therefore I'll add this little bit of information in, or I'll take this out. So these sort of actual making time for those conversations.
Absolutely, and it just builds a relationship beyond, you know, in some roles in HR, you could just be pushing information via an email. And your leader might say it's because, you know, we need to do it because of XYZ. Well, speak to the people that are actually receiving it, and and yeah, have an opportunity to build that relationship up. Because what I have found, particularly in the organisation I've worked with, and particularly in Cisco, Cisco is a network organisation in terms of it builds networks, but
it also is networking.
Network. Yeah, it's also a human network organisation, and so don't forget the power of, say, Lucinda, I've asked you to say, you know, why is it that you need it? Gosh, tell me more about your job. Then in conversations, there is a chance to go, gosh, I had a conversation with Jen, she was really interested in my job. You create a bit of a positive buzz about you and your demeanour and your curiosity. And that's not to say everyone's you're going to create a buzz with everybody, but it is phenomenal how some little ripples can become bigger waves, I think.
Absolutely. So if you're a proper classic matrix organisation, I guess, in terms of that, really building those relationships, and they kind of ripple out, as you say. Okay, so I mean, just briefly, and then, because I think that's really interesting where you've gone, but you've actually kind of you've been at Cisco since for about 11 years, have you, ish?
Yeah. Gosh, you'll be coming up to 12. Yeah.
So you've obviously done a number of roles on the way up there. Do you want to just briefly run through those, if any of them were very different, or the journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So quickly before I went to Cisco, I was at Siemens, where we met, and throughout my career, I've always been an HR business partner. So just partnering different areas of the business and becoming more senior, partnering more senior business leaders, taking on a variety of different business units, and sort of grown through the HR business partner route. And I did that with Cisco. So when I came in, I was aligned to, I moved from going from a UK-based organisation then to, in Siemens, then to Cisco, which was global, but I did a regional role there. And so that was a great step up in terms of my HR business partner growth, to suddenly go, okay, I'm used to dealing with senior leaders, but now this is across multiple countries, 60 odd countries with very different cultures. And it was a culture shock, but it was a delightful shock in terms of, oh my God, this is amazing, in terms of the differences and the complexity. I loved it. And so and then in Cisco, I then went to different business partnering roles for about 8 years, and then was given the opportunity to continue with my business partnering, but also to take a country role where I was then not just doing the functional business partnering, sort of looking at the functional HR plans, but then also looking after a country. So I did UK and Ireland, the two countries, and did that role in addition, which was more looking at what is the country HR plan as opposed to the functional. And I really enjoyed that, and I really liked the mix. And then the role that I've now got was created. And frankly, it scared the what's it out of me. When it was posted, my boss said, I would like you to consider looking, you should look at this and like you to consider applying. And I looked at it, and my first thing was to run for the hills. It was a new job, so I felt like it was a spotlight on this role.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like I had a blueprint in which to follow to go, oh, okay. I didn't have anybody to ask, okay, what works, really what doesn't. So it felt all very new, spotlight. It felt, going back to our first point in terms of, but what do I know about the 95 countries? It was a massive leadership role. And, having gone from being looking after a team directly, this was now a leader of leaders. So it's all the things that made my brain want to run away from. And it really is my leader saying, I really think you should look at it. And then talking to my husband, Stephen, and both of them sort of trying to quieten my gremlins. And I'm going, what about? And they're like, and they helped me knock those out the park. And actually, Stephen did that right at the beginning when I looked at the back of people management, back when we used to apply for jobs in the back of people management, they had the vacancies. I remember seeing the Siemens job and going, I can't do that. And then my husband going through, going, but you've done that. You could probably blag your way through that. And he was the one that made me reply. So my husband has been absolutely amazing of being the opposite of my saboteur, going, you can do, you can do it.
Giving you, having your back.
Yeah, exactly. So I am a sort of person that needs my sponsors and supporters, and the people that I feel that I can trust to have the conversations and to say out loud sometimes what my gremlins or saboteurs are saying, because sometimes saying it out loud you realize how ridiculous it is, and also they quite often can provide counter evidence to what your saboteur will say.
That's yes, it's helpful. So I suppose then tips for other people to find yourself other mentors or other people who have your back or support you, make sure you've got the people who have your back. And
exactly.
People. I'm sure you do that for others.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because I know what it feels like to have that, and and everyone has saboteurs. People just have different volumes of their saboteurs in their head. So I know how important it is for people. So for me, I look for evidence outside as to whether I'm doing a good job, and so having people tell me where my strengths are and where my challenges are, that's what I need. And like, what, my husband hopefully will always be my biggest supporter, but having other people as well that know the work you do, not just blind supporters. I'm sure, Luce, if I phoned you and said, oh, I'm thinking about this job, you go, Jen, go, Jen. We've not worked together in the last 20 years, so you don't know whether actually I am completely useless. Hopefully I'm not.
Sure, you're not. But no, but I would cheer you on blindly. You're right.
Yeah. But having people that know the work that you do is really important, and that's where true sponsorship comes from. People that can really advocate for you they're in the room, they can advocate for you, and they can provide really good examples of the work that you do. And I'm thankful that my leader was that, and she played the role of challenging me and my saboteurs.
And that's another reason, I suppose, to build strong relationships as well with other people, and for them to know you and to see where you're doing things.
Completely.
One question for you before I kind of go into sort of challenges and successes and things like that. What I remember, because say we were working together at the same company for a long time, and you were definitely you would have continued up to the top role there, although it would never have been as senior as the roles that you're in the business now. But what made you make the decision to leave? Because I think sometimes that's the challenge, actually leaving an organisation to go and get much more opportunity there.
Yeah, and I think it was
quite brave, things. I suppose it felt quite brave at that time.
But probably going back to our previous conversation, there was somebody that we worked with in Siemens, Charlie, who then had moved into Cisco. Now he'd become like this stellar role in Cisco, and he was the one that there was a role that came up, and he again, like I've just said in the previous example, he said, Jen, I think you should have a look at this, consider it for the role. Now he was not the hiring manager, he was not making the decision, but he
sparked it. So you didn't go looking for it, he sparked it, you listened, you went, and that was the right thing. So again, so people listening, having those, looking outside and looking for those opportunities, not being told them.
Yeah, and so when I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, that is an amazing opportunity. And I think, but I needed that, probably a slight kick up the bottom, and also somebody go, you've got this. I think I needed that. I think there's also a piece of, like, in the trajectory in the previous organisation, it was so dependent on other roles becoming free. And I think I just got to the end of my patience of being said, you're next in line.
It was dead man's shoes, wasn't it? Let's face it.
Exactly, completely. And it also felt it was an organisation that just felt like it was on the decline, and just like those two things just aren't lighting my fire. And I felt like I'd been there and done that. Yeah. And I don't feel, in the coming up to 12 years at Cisco, I do not feel that I have been there and done it. Every day is a school day. Every day my grey matter is being challenged left, right and centre, not just on the technicalities of HR, but on how we navigate. And so I still feel not brand new at Cisco, but I don't feel coming up to 12 years in. Yeah, I don't feel jaded. I don't feel I've got it licked, which is great. So my curiosity and my energy are still high.
Brilliant. And I suppose that's a nice segue into saying sort of key successes, key challenges, any learnings that stand out that would be worth sharing with people.
I think for me, one of the biggest successes I have felt recently is when I took this job, the country consultants sort of sat in the background and they did the things they did, and it was all behind the curtain. The US, because it was all countries outside of the US, and everything outside of the US was either, oh, is it different really, or was like highly complex and they didn't want to know. And so it felt like, yeah, if you could just carry on doing what you're doing, and yeah, as long as we're haven't got escalations, carry on. And then 2 years on, the country teams is now being elevated to a position where now the global CHRO understands the impact the country team have on major strategic projects within Cisco, and everything goes through them. Now, this isn't about, building up my role or feeding an ego, but it's the change in narrative. I had to, when I first started, was to justify why the team was the size it was, because I didn't understand the complexity. Now, where I have vacancies or where I've got a need, they're almost going, are you sure that's enough? Are you sure you don't need something more? Because they're seeing the value that the team are playing in the everyday activities, and they're massive strategic projects. Like, we've just done our biggest acquisition, and the country teams are fundamental in the importance in getting the employees onboarded and delivering. And so that, to me, to see that shift has just been phenomenal. And that's the team have done that.
Yes.
They have shown their value. And so I could not be prouder. And like the amount of tsunamis we've had to navigate and mountains to climb, they've done it and they've proved their worth. And so I think that change in narrative has been phenomenal.
And you do hear that quite. I think that is really impressive. You often hear this thing where, oh yes, you've got to have a certain ratio of HR to whatever, a very narrow kind of measure, without looking at, well, let's say, the role that you're playing in terms of bringing values and also protecting, bringing value and reducing risk for a business. And did you feel that you had to make that overt, or did people just see it because everyone was punching? Did you have to point that out?
Yeah, so when I first took the role, it was me understanding, okay, how does work get done in country? What are the drivers of the work? And what is the impact if that work doesn't get done? And so some of it was a bit of and also how that work fits within the ecosystem. Again, going back to my first point, it's not just nothing we do in country, we do on our own, end to end. We rely on so many parts. So it's how we fit in with the ecosystem. And I think really one of the failings of organizations, and quite often in HR, is people talk about their bit of HR, not actually how they sit within the ecosystem and how, as a collective, they drive outcomes. And so understanding how we fit within the bigger picture, and talking about the value of going across the piece, because it isn't about just waving the flag for my country consultants. It's actually all the people that help create the work. So you're bringing other people with you and lifting them up as well. But I had to go on a campaign to begin with, just to get a basic understanding. And then this last year, given a number of different things that we've had to deliver, has really put it into focus, where I now don't get asked, what the country do? Are you sure you need all those people? It's now the reverse, where people are going, hold on a minute, we've got to be careful, because that all goes through the country. We can't overwhelm. We've got to stay sequence. And so never ever had that conversation 2 years ago.
Yeah, amazing. One of the things I think it's occurring to me every time we're going through this, but I know this about you from when we went on our SDI training together. As we keep going through this, I know you're very people oriented, but what is also very obvious is your ability to analyze without being overly detailed. So a lot of what you're talking about, you I'm sure you've had the facts and figures, you're having the data, you're very comfortable with that, which I think makes you very convincing, I guess, in terms of, I'm sure you do that, but I don't know whether you're aware of.
No, I'm not. I think
otherwise.
No, yeah. I don't think I am aware. I think I'm just naturally curious. So I want to find answers out, and whether that lies in data or feeling or behavior. I'm just generally curious. So I think it's
You've got that level of analytical, it's where you talked about, I find out what goes on and what's the impact in the company. So you're quite methodical about how you discover something, and then you get to the bottom of it, and then putting something in place.
I have a very simple brain. I just need to understand what are the facts and what are we dealing with for us to have an impact on that. So I think it's just my simple mind getting it down.
That's it. I mean, that's a great way forward. So, and again, it's taking it back to basics, being simple. So I suppose if you were talking to your younger self when you were starting out as an HR graduate, anything you do differently, or any top tips for yourself or other people starting out in their careers?
I think a couple of things. I think the first thing is to sort of own your values. So I think it's only been really in the last 5 years that I've been really comfortable to say that my key value is care. I genuinely care for people, and that's not blindly for everybody, but I genuinely care for the people I work with, the people I work for, and the people that work for me. I genuinely care. And I take time to understand them. I also really care about the work, because I think back in the day when you were going through interviews, you had to say that you cared about business. You couldn't be an HR professional and say, I want to be an HR because I like people. It was all that you had to be very business, and I think it's an and. I think you can absolutely. I really care about the work that we do and the outcome it drives for the business, and I care for people, and it can absolutely work together. And it's also part of my value system in terms of I really care for my friends, for my family, and therefore there are trade-offs that have to be made when you go, do you know what, I can't make that meeting because I've got this, and just really owning it. That's not whereas in my younger self it'd been, okay, what is the impression I'm giving? I've got to be seen to be all about the business focus, and it's that and so I think for me it's really owning what your values are and being comfortable with it, and being able to articulate that not just verbally but in all the things that you do. And I do think if you spoke to people that I work with or my friends, they would probably all say that, and so I feel really comfortable with that now, rather than trying to project a persona that somebody else has crafted. Again, you of course you need to be able to flex. So if somebody is purely about the business, you need to have some agility, but it doesn't need to take away from your own value system or your own values. And so I feel so much more comfortable being what you see is what you get, and then we can work together on what we're trying to achieve. This is me.
I mean that resonates all the way through, and in terms of authenticity, that's exactly what it is. But also, presumably, you feel comfortable in what you're doing, you're loving what you're doing, and your energy has come through, all the way through of that, and you feel like the same. You do feel like the same person, but of course, we were friends as well as work colleagues. That makes sense, doesn't it? You were authentically. Yeah, absolutely. Jen, thank you so much for joining me on the HR Uprising podcast. I'm so impressed by what you're achieving, and it's really inspirational to hear about your journey and what you're doing, and wish you all the best for the future.
Oh, thank you, Luce.
I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.